Have you ever wondered what our cities will look like when the lights finally go out for good? Picture the bustling streets of Tokyo or the towering canyons of New York, not as they are now, but drowned beneath 300 feet of crushing saltwater. The silence here is absolute, a heavy blanket that suffocates the echoes of the millions who once lived here. There are no fish darting between the rusted skeletons of skyscrapers, and the whales have long since ceased their songs in these desolate waters. Instead, the ocean floor is a graveyard of concrete and steel, softened only by the relentless accumulation of silt and time. But if you brush away the sand, you won't just find the bones of our architecture. You will find the true legacy we left behind. It is a geological layer so distinct and unnatural that it screams our name to the uncaring future. We called it the Anthropocene, but the ocean has given it a new, darker name: the age of the plastic crust. Geologists of the future, if any ever exist to read these rocks, will find a distinct stripe in the Earth's crust that marks our brief reign. This is not a layer of ash or lava, but a vibrant, toxic confetti of synthetic polymers compressed into stone. We call them plastiglomerates, strange, hybrid rocks formed where our plastic trash melted and fused with natural sediment, lava, or coral. Imagine wandering a beach a million years from now and picking up a stone that looks like granite, only to realize it is speckled with the fossilized remains of toothbrushes and bottle caps. These are the diamonds of our era, nearly indestructible monuments to our addiction to convenience. They have survived the crushing pressure of the deep, chemically altering the seabed into a mosaic of synthetic colors. It is beautiful in a way, but it is a sick, poisonous beauty that warns anything living to stay away. But look closer at these plastic reefs, and you will notice something profoundly wrong with the water surrounding them. It isn't just salty. It tastes bitter, metallic, and thick with the chemical ghosts of degrading polymers. Over millions of years, these plastiglomerates have not just sat idly. They have begun to weep, leaching complex additives and plasticizers into the surrounding current. This chemical soup has fundamentally changed the rules of biology in the deep ocean, creating a zone of exclusion where traditional life cannot survive. The corals are dead, dissolved by the rising acidity, and the scavengers have moved on to cleaner pastures. This is a dead zone, a monument to preservation where nothing rots because the very water has become a preservative. It feels like a museum exhibit that has been closed for eternity, gathering dust in the dark. And yet, nature abhors a vacuum, and even here, in this toxic silence, something has begun to stir. Deep in the crevices of a fused plastic boulder, where the concentration of toxins is highest, a new kind of slime has started to grow. It isn't green or vibrant like the algae we know. It is a dull, lifeless gray, looking more like industrial paste than biological matter. This is the gray goo, a supercolony of mutated bacteria and fungi that has done the impossible. It has learned to eat our trash. Evolution is a master of improvisation, and faced with a mountain of energy-rich polyethylene, it forged a creature capable of digesting it. But this digestion is not a clean process. It is a violent, chemical burn that releases heat and strange, viscous byproducts. The goo pulses slowly, not with a heartbeat, but with the rhythmic expansion of gas bubbles trapped within its thick membrane. It carpets the ocean floor like a suffocating blanket, digesting the last remnants of human civilization one layer at a time. There is a genuine element of horror in watching this gray sludge move, however slowly, across the ocean floor. It creeps forward with a terrifying inevitability, dissolving rock and plastic alike, turning our history into energy for its own growth. It doesn't have eyes or a brain, yet it behaves with a singular, terrifying purpose: to consume everything that is artificial. As it spreads, it coats the rusted rebar of ancient buildings, softening the metal until it collapses into a cloud of gray dust. This is the ocean's immune system finally waking up to fight the infection we left behind, but the cure looks far worse than the disease. The sheer scale of it is nauseating. Miles of seabed are covered in this undulating, living carpet. It is a monotonous, gray hellscape that seems to have swallowed all diversity, leaving only itself. You might think this is where the story ends, with the world reduced to a slime mold eating a plastic rock. But this is actually where the real mystery begins. Because this gray goo isn't just a stomach, it's becoming a habitat, a shelter for something else that is hiding in the dark. If you were to shine a light into the thickest patches of the slime, you would see shadows moving deep within the translucent muck. Small, darting shapes are navigating the chemical burns and the toxic heat, using the goo as a shield against the cold ocean. These are not the majestic creatures we know, but hardy, desperate survivors that have adapted to live inside a digestive system. They are the bottom feeders, the worms, and the tiny crustaceans, but they are changing rapidly. The goo protects them from predators, and the radiation from the decaying waste fuels their mutations. The silence of the deep is broken now, not by whale song, but by the wet, squelching sound of the goo expanding and shifting. It creates a soundscape that is purely alien, a biological churning that echoes through the empty canyons of our drowned cities. This ecosystem is entirely self-contained, a dark garden growing on the compost heap of the Anthropocene. It is fascinating and repulsive in equal measure, a reminder that life does not care about human aesthetics or morality. It only cares about survival, and right now, survival means embracing the toxicity. The creatures evolving in this sludge are being forged in a crucible of poison, making them tougher and stranger than anything that came before. They are the children of the waste, inheriting a kingdom of trash that we built for them. As we pull back from this gray, undulating landscape, we catch a glimpse of something larger moving in the gloom above the slime. The bottom of the food chain has been rewritten, and that energy is finally trickling up to the survivors in the open water. The gray goo has laid the foundation for a new epoch, one where the rules of nature have been twisted by human hands. The silence is ending, and the ocean is holding its breath, waiting for the first true kings of this new world to reveal themselves. Something has survived the toxicity, something intelligent and hungry, and it is watching the gray fields with eyes that are very different from our own. The plastic fossils are just the beginning. The real story is about to break the surface. 5 million years is a long time to wait for a new landlord. The plastic reefs have finally been buried under true sediment, and the ocean is clean again, but it is a stranger's ocean. If you were to dive into these future waters, you wouldn't find the familiar schools of tuna or the lumbering shadows of whales. The niche of the intelligent tool user has been vacant for eons, but nature abhors a vacuum. While mammals were gasping on a dying surface, the real innovators were waiting in the weeds. The octopus, that 8-armed alien we once kept in aquariums, has finally inherited the earth. But don't expect little creatures hiding in coconuts. Evolution has taken the brakes off, and the results are terrifyingly magnificent. Meet the Titan Kraken, the lonely king of this new world. It isn't a mythical beast, but a biological inevitability. Imagine an octopus the size of a school bus, drifting through the open blue with a grace that defies its bulk. Its skin is a canvas of living pixels, shifting from the deep indigo of the abyss to the blinding white of the surface sun in a millisecond. But why did they get so big? The answer lies in a single, crucial genetic accident. For millions of years, octopuses were cursed by their own biology. They were brilliant, but they were born to die young. A hormonal switch killed them the moment they reproduced, wiping out their wisdom before they could pass it on. But in the chaos of the post-human ocean, that switch broke. Now they don't die, they grow, and they remember. A Titan Kraken can live for centuries, accumulating knowledge that would have staggered a human professor. They have learned to use the bones of their ancestors as tools, fashioning spears and shields from the calcified remains of the fallen. But here is where the horror creeps in. They are the smartest things on the planet, yet they are utterly, profoundly alone. They have no schools, no libraries, no internet. So how does a solitary genius record its life's work? They write it on themselves. Watch closely as the Titan's skin ripples with complex, geometric patterns that never repeat. These aren't just camouflage. They are memories. The skin of a Titan is a living chalkboard. By manipulating their chromatophores, the pigment cells in their skin, they can tattoo complex narratives across their bodies. A spiraling pattern on the left tentacle might be a map of good hunting grounds. A jagged strobe effect on the mantle might be the story of a battle with a shark. They spend decades perfecting these displays, talking to themselves in a language of light and color that no one else can read. It is a tragic form of immortality. They are walking encyclopedias of a world that has no students. When two titans meet, it isn't a handshake. It's a standoff. They flash their life stories at each other in a blinding, hypnotic display of dominance. And this is their fatal flaw, the tragedy that keeps them from being true gods. They are cannibals. Despite their brilliance, they never lost the instinct to eat their competition. A meeting between two titans almost always ends in death, which means their society is a population of one. They cannot build cities because a city requires trust, and to a titan, a neighbor is just a meal that hasn't been caught yet. So they drift in their splendid isolation, solving complex engineering problems with bone levers and hydraulic pressure, but never sharing the solution. They are the ultimate individualists, hoarding the secrets of the universe in their own flesh until they die, taking their libraries with them. But intelligence without wisdom is a dangerous thing. The titans have become arrogant. They rule the pelagic zone, the sunlit upper waters where the food is plentiful, and they treat the ocean floor as a waste dump. They discard their broken tools and the bones of their prey into the abyss, ignoring the darkness below. They assume that because they are the smartest things in the light, they are the only things that matter. But they are wrong. In the crushing pressure of the deep, where the Titan's beautiful skin language cannot be seen, something else has been evolving. Something that has learned the one lesson the Titans refused to learn: the power of numbers. While the Titans drift in their lonely orbits, scratching their memoirs into their skin, the seabed is waking up. The discarded bones dropping from above aren't just trash. They are resources. Down in the dark, a different kind of intelligence is festering. A collective mind that doesn't care about individuality or art, cares about efficiency. The Titans are the short-lived kings of a golden age, blinded by their own brilliance, completely unaware that they are currently feeding the very army that will rise to destroy them. The ocean is big, but it isn't big enough for two apex civilizations. So take a good look at the Titan Kraken while you can. Marvel at its pulsing, multicolored skin and its terrifying intellect. It is the pinnacle of solitary evolution, a creature that conquered death but couldn't conquer its own nature. It is a lonely god floating in a silent cathedral, writing poetry that no one will ever read. But the silence is deceptive. The water is beginning to vibrate with a low, rhythmic thrumming coming from the deep. The Titans think they are the authors of this world's history, but they are about to find out that they are just a chapter. And the next page is being written in bone. While the Titan Krakens are busy writing their lonely poetry in the sunlit shallows, a very different kind of power is rising in the eternal dark below. 2 miles down, the pressure is crushing, and the silence is absolute, but the ocean floor is no longer a wasteland. If you were to drift over the abyssal plains 20 million years from now, you would see something that defies all logic: cities. Not the chaotic reefs of nature, but structured, geometric metropolises rising from the silt. These are the cathedrals of the deep, spiraling towers made of calcium carbonate and, if you look closely, the gnawed, white ribs of the Titans that fell from above. This is the domain of the hive, and it is the most terrifyingly efficient machine nature has ever built. The architects of this bone empire are not mammals or cephalopods, but arthropods. They are the distant, twisted descendants of creatures like the pistol shrimp and the yeti crab, forged by millions of years of evolution into a perfect eusocial society. Unlike the solitary Titans, these creatures have no concept of I. There is only we. They are small, armored in chitin that is white as bone, and they move with a synchronized, ticking precision that looks less like biology and more like clockwork. A single drone is mindless, barely more than a reflex, but together, a colony of millions possesses a collective intelligence that rivals a supercomputer. They don't just survive in the dark. They have industrialized it. Walk through the streets of a hive city if you can survive the pressure, and you will see agriculture on a massive scale. They farm hydrothermal vents, carefully tending to gardens of chemosynthetic bacteria that feed the colony. But the most disturbing industry is their construction. The hive wastes nothing. When a Titan kraken dies and drifts down from the surface, the hive doesn't just eat it, they mine it. Swarms of thousands of workers strip the flesh in hours, and then the bones are carried off to be fused into the architecture. The ribs become arches. The beaks become keystones. It is a civilization literally built on the graveyards of its superiors, a gruesome recycling plant that turns the dead kings of the surface into the bricks of the underworld. But how does a mindless swarm coordinate such complex engineering in pitch darkness? They don't use sound, and they don't use pheromones. They use light. The darkness of the abyss is broken by a constant, rhythmic pulsing of bioluminescence. This isn't the soft glow of a firefly. It is high-speed optical data transmission. Each drone has patches of photophores that can flash thousands of times a second, sending complex instructions to its neighbors. Stand on a ridge overlooking a hive city, and it looks like a sprawling nervous system of blue and green lightning, a silent thunderstorm where every flash is a command. Asterisk dig, build, feed, kill. Asterisk. The horror of the hive lies in this absolute unity. There is no dissent, no hesitation, and no mercy. If a worker is injured, it is immediately consumed by its siblings to recycle the nutrients. If a tunnel collapses, hundreds will sacrifice themselves to shore up the walls with their own bodies. They are a biological fluid, poring over obstacles and solving problems through sheer attrition. To a human observer, it is deeply unsettling. A society that functions perfectly because it has stripped away everything that makes life recognizable. It is a world without love or hate, only function. And for 20 million years, that function has been to grow. But growth requires space, and the ocean floor is finite. The hive cities have spread from the vents to the plains, and now they are running out of room. The chemical signals ripples through the colony, a consensus reached by 1 billion tiny minds in an instant. They can no longer expand outward, so they must expand upward. For the first time in eons, the blue lightning of the hive begins to shift its focus from the mud to the black water above. The drones stop digging and start swimming. The collective mind has calculated that the resource-rich waters of the pelagic zone are the next logical step for annexation. This is a problem. The open water is the domain of the Titan krakens, the solitary gods who have never known a predator they couldn't outsmart. But the Titans are about to face something they cannot intimidate or reason with. A Titan can kill 1,000 drones without breaking a sweat, but the hive has 1 billion more waiting in line. It is the classic battle of quality versus quantity, the genius individual against the mindless mob. The Titans have the size and the brains, but the hive has the numbers and the hunger. The seabed is rising to meet the surface, and the collision will be catastrophic. As the first scout swarms of the hive begin to ascend into the twilight zone, their bioluminescent signaling changes. The flashing slows down, becoming synchronized across miles of water. It is no longer a conversation. It is a targeting beacon. Above them, a Titan kraken drifting lazily in the current spots the strange lights rising from the deep. It is curious, perhaps even amused by the pretty display. It doesn't realize that it is looking at the eyes of a single, massive predator that stretches across the entire ocean floor. The war for the blue planet is about to begin, and the first casualty will be the silence. War, as we know it, is loud. It is the sound of explosions, the scream of engines, and the crack of gunfire. But in the deep ocean of the future, war is silent. It is a biological arms race fought in the crushing dark, where the weapons are not made of steel and powder, but of flesh and venom. The conflict between the Titan krakens and the hive of bones didn't begin with a declaration. It began with a slow, creeping realization that the ocean wasn't big enough for two gods. The Titans, those solitary geniuses of the open water, looked down and saw their domain being eaten away by the rising tide of the hive. And like any threatened superpower, they didn't just fight back, they innovated. The Titans couldn't build missiles, so they bred them. In the shallow nurseries of the sunlit zone, they began to genetically engineer a cousin of the common squid. These weren't creatures meant to live. They were born to die. Small, fast, and packed with a payload of pressurized neurotoxins, these suicide squids became the Titan's primary long-range artillery. A Titan would release a shoal of these living torpedoes, guiding them with complex flashes of light from its skin. They would streak down into the abyss, seeking out the chemical signature of the hive's cities. Upon impact, they didn't explode with fire, but with a cloud of paralyzing venom so potent it could stop a heart in nanoseconds. But the hive was not a passive victim. The collective mind analyzed the threat, dissected the casualties, and responded with terrifying speed. If the Titans were using chemistry, the hive would use physics. They began to breed a new caste of warrior drones, creatures with exoskeletons so dense they were effectively bulletproof. These ironclads were heavy, abandoning the ability to swim gracefully for the ability to sink like stones. Launched from the seafloor by magnetic, muscle-powered rails, they would shoot upward like anti-aircraft fire, their serrated shells designed to punch through the soft, unprotected bodies of the Titans. It was a gruesome exchange. Poison raining down, living shrapnel shooting up. The scale of the slaughter is hard to comprehend. We are talking about millions of deaths every day, a constant churn of biological matter that turned the midwater zone into a choking smog of decay. And because this war was fought with biology, the dead didn't just disappear. They rotted. The immense quantity of decomposing flesh began to change the very chemistry of the ocean. The oxygen levels in the water plummeted as bacteria feasted on the corpses, creating massive dead zones where nothing could breathe. The water itself began to turn a sickly, bruised purple, the color of sulfur-reducing bacteria thriving on the rot. This was the Purple Ocean event, a catastrophe that neither side intended but both were powerless to stop. The Titans, breathing the oxygen-rich surface water, watched in horror as their hunting grounds suffocated from below. The hive, dependent on the stable chemistry of the deep, found their farms withering in the acidic gloom. It was a war of attrition that destroyed the battlefield itself. The ocean, once a vibrant blue cathedral of life, had become a septic tank. The silence of the deep was now the silence of a graveyard, broken only by the occasional, desperate flash of a dying bioluminescent drone. In their hubris, the Titans tried one final, desperate gambit. They engineered a plague carrier, a leviathan designed to swim into the heart of the hive and release a viral payload that would dissolve chitin. It worked, but too well. The virus mutated, jumping species barriers and infecting the ocean's plankton, the very base of the food chain. The collapse was sudden and total. The food web disintegrated. The Titans starved in their lonely palaces. The hive suffocated in their buried cities. The great civilizations of the ocean had fought a war for supremacy, and the only winner was the bacteria. As the era of the giants came to a close, the ocean grew quiet once more. The massive carcasses of the Titan krakens drifted to the bottom, settling on the ruins of the hive cities they had despised. It was a layer of fossils on top of fossils, a cautionary tale written in stone. The great filter had done its work. Intelligence, it seemed, was a self-correcting problem. But evolution is stubborn. In the toxic purple shallows, where the air met the poisoned water, a few small survivors were gasping for breath. They were not the kings or the queens of the old world. They were the refugees. These survivors, small, shelled relatives of the Nautilus, found themselves trapped between a suffocating ocean and a harsh, dry sky. They had no choice. To stay in the water was to die. So, with tentative, clumsy movements, they dragged their shells onto the mudflats. They were leaving the battlefield behind, abandoning the graveyard of their ancestors for a strange, dry world that had once belonged to a forgotten species called humans. The war was over, but the exodus had just begun. The ocean had failed them, so they would try their luck with the stars. 50 million years have passed since the war of the giants turned the oceans into a purple, acidic soup. The silence has returned, but it is a heavy, exhausted silence. The planet is healing as it always does, but the scars are visible. The water level has dropped, locking millions of cubic miles of toxic ice into the poles, and the coastlines have expanded into vast, stinking mudflats. It is here, in this harsh transition zone between the poison sea and the scorching sun, that the next chapter of Earth's history is gasping for air. They are not majestic kings like the Titans or efficient engineers like the Hive. They are refugees. Meet the amphibious nautiloid, a creature that is doing something no self-respecting cephalopod should ever do. It is learning to walk. Imagine a creature the size of a dog, encased in a spiraling, iridescent shell that looks like a piece of pearl jewelry dragged through the mud. Its tentacles have toughened into leathery, muscular legs, dragging its heavy house across the wet sand with a wet, rhythmic shuck-shuck sound. It is a clumsy, desperate motion, driven by necessity. The water behind them is still too low in oxygen to support complex brains, so they have come to the surface to steal our air. Inside their shells, a primitive lung is pulsing, tasting the dry wind for the first time in eons. It burns, it scrapes, but it keeps them alive. They are the first explorers of a new world, crawling over the graves of the old one. But this world is not empty. As they migrate inland, seeking calcium to build their shells, they stumble upon strange, unnatural formations in the rock. The wind has eroded the sandstone cliffs, revealing the fossils of the Anthropocene. But these aren't dinosaur bones. They find a layer of compressed stone that glitters with impossible materials. A fossilized spark plug, the crushed remnants of a smartphone screen, a gold wedding ring still encircling a finger bone that turned to dust millions of years ago. To the nautiloids, these are not trash. They are artifacts of a mythic age, proof that giants once walked this land. There is a profound sense of mystery in how they interact with these objects. Watch as a nautiloid wraps a tentacle around a fossilized glass bottle, running its sensitive suckers over the smooth, manufactured curve. They have no concept of manufacturing. To them, this object was grown, not made. It is perfect, seamless, and alien. They treat these zones with a terrified reverence, avoiding the cursed patches where the radiation from our waste still lingers in the rock. We have become their ghosts, the inexplicable precursors who shaped the geology of their world and then vanished into the sky. This reverence shapes their developing minds. They do not build machines of metal and fire. They fear them. Instead, they turn inward, mastering the one technology that has never failed them: biology. Their intelligence is totally alien to ours. They don't write down equations. They taste the chemical composition of a rock and instinctively understand its molecular structure. They don't build houses. They sing chemical signals to coral-like fungi that grow into shelters around them. They are not conquering the planet. They are gardening it. It is a soft, quiet civilization that leaves no scars, a direct rejection of the violent legacy they found in the rocks. But the land is harsh, and the memory of the ocean's betrayal is deep in their genetic code. They know that this planet is a trap. The sun is getting hotter, the water is getting scarcer, and the fossils in the cliffs tell them that extinction is the only rule that matters. As their society matures over thousands of years, their gaze shifts from the mud at their feet to the stars above. They possess an innate understanding of the tides and the moon, a biological astronomy that tells them the ultimate truth. The ocean is not enough. If they stay, they die. If they want to survive, they must do what the giants presumably did. They must leave. They begin to grow their vessels. Not rockets of steel and fuel, but massive, hollow seed pods engineered from the toughest biological polymers. These are not ships. They are wombs. They are designed to float on the solar winds, carrying the dormant embryos of the nautiloid race into the void. It is a project that takes 10,000 years, a slow, silent preparation for the ultimate migration. The beach where they found our trash becomes the launch pad for their survival. They are abandoning the cradle that tried to kill them, fueled by the terrifying suspicion that they are alone in the universe, or worse, that the giants are waiting for them out there. As the first of these organic arcs breaks the atmosphere, riding a column of chemically generated gas, the nautiloids look back at the Earth one last time. It is a blue marble, scarred by purple bruises, a beautiful, deadly home that they have finally outgrown. They leave behind the silence of the deep, the graveyards of the titans, and the mysteries of the Anthropocene. The cycle of marine life on Earth has ended. The ocean has finally succeeded in its greatest task. It has given birth to a child that can walk away from it. The water is still, but the sky is full of seeds. 200 million years. It is a number so large that it loses its meaning, becoming just a static buzz in the human brain. But for the Earth, it is enough time to forget everything. The continents have drifted together and pulled apart again, erasing the last geological scars of the Anthropocene. The plastic is gone, the radiation has decayed into background noise, and the atmosphere is sweet and clean. But if you were to stand on the surface of this new world and look up, you wouldn't see the blue sky you remember. You would see a ring, a shimmering, verdant halo encircling the equator, not made of rock or ice, but of life. This is the organic singularity. The descendants of those frightened, crawling nautiloids didn't just leave the planet. They surrounded it. They realized that true mastery wasn't about conquering nature with metal and fire, but about becoming nature. They have dismantled the distinction between creature and machine. The ring you see is a living Dyson swarm, a web of genetically engineered tissue that drinks sunlight and filters cosmic radiation. It is a biosphere turned inside out, a cathedral of flesh and leaf that protects the cradle below. We spent our brief time on Earth trying to build things that wouldn't break. They spent eons building things that could heal. And drifting through this green halo are the gardeners themselves, the void leviathans. These are not the whales of our ocean, though they share a certain melancholic majesty. They are biological starships, colossal organisms the size of cities that have adapted to the hard vacuum of space. Their skin is a shield of diamond-hard organic lattice, and their blood is a supercoolant that prevents them from boiling or freezing. They don't use rockets. They use solar sails grown from their own bodies, catching the light of the sun to push themselves silently through the dark. They are the ultimate triumph of the ocean, a marine creature that has learned to swim in the sea of stars. Inside each of these leviathans is a library, but not one written in books or hard drives. It is written in DNA. They carry the genetic history of the entire planet within them, a backup drive of Earth's biodiversity. Somewhere, encoded in the spiraling chains of their biological banks, is the memory of the Titan Kraken, the hive of bones, and yes, perhaps even us. We are no longer the authors of the story. We are just a footnote, a small sequence of code stored in the belly of a beast that will outlive our sun. It is a humbling thought. We worried so much about our legacy, only to end up as a ghost story in someone else's genes. But why stay? The sun is getting older, brighter, and angrier. The oceans below, the ancestral womb of all life, will eventually boil away. The leviathans know this. They possess a patience that we never had, a perspective that spans geological epochs. They have spent millions of years preparing for this moment, growing their young, storing their energy, and waiting for the alignment of the stars. The time for gardening is over. The time for migration has begun. With a synchronized movement that ripples through the entire orbital ring, the great living ships unfurl their sails. One by one, they break formation, peeling away from the green halo like seeds carried on the wind. They turn their eyeless faces away from the Earth, away from the sun that birthed them, and toward the cold, infinite dark of the galaxy. They are not fleeing in panic. They are leaving with dignity. They are taking the life of our planet on a journey that will last billions of years, seeding new oceans on worlds we will never see. The Earth, once so loud with our wars and our worries, is left silent and empty, a husk that has served its purpose. As the last Leviathan fades into the starlight, we are left with a final, uncomfortable truth. We always believed the Earth was ours, that we were the pinnacle of evolution, the main character of the story. But we were wrong. We were just the catalyst. We were the brief, violent spark that melted the plastic and warmed the climate, setting the stage for the real players to emerge. The ocean didn't belong to us. We were just tourists, noisy guests in a house that was waiting for its true owners to wake up.